Thank you very much for being with us here today, and thank you for being a part of our new exhibition, Revelations. I'm speaking with Patrick Perry as we delve a little deeper into the artist's psyche and into sort of the stuff behind what we see here, or what we'll be seeing once we launch this program. So why don't we just start at the very beginning? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your artistic practice? What's your artistic background?
Sure. Well, my introduction, I guess, to the arts really started in Fredericton. I'm not originally from Fredericton. I'm from the Maritimes. I'm from Nova Scotia. And I started attending New Brunswick College of Craft and Design. I really wanted to be a potter. That didn't turn out. And right next to the pottery studio was a jewelry studio. And there was just something about, it really started with materiality. There was just something about the material and the mode of production that I was really into. So I ended up doing 3 years there. I studied under Brigitte Clavette, which was a really, really great experience. And then I moved on to Toronto. I went on and I did a sculpture. I was in sculpture installation in at OCAD. I went back to NASCAD to finish my BFA. And then it's been a sort of, then I decided I was going to do education. I got an education degree. And then subsequently since then, I've done 2 master's degrees. So, it's been there's always been a desire to a quest for knowledge and a quest for understanding. And it usually happens through me questioning. There are basic fundamental questions that I have, and I address them through materials. That's how I address my own practice.
Right. So you're living in New York City now?
I am living in New York City, yeah. I've been here for 15 years.
Yeah, what brought you there?
When I finished, I did a master's degree. When I was teaching at the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design, I really wanted to solidify my position there, and I thought a master's degree would be a very good way to do that. So in looking at programs, I didn't want to leave teaching completely and go into a master's program. So I found a low residency program at the Maine College of Art. I did the 2 years at the Maine College of Art, and then there was this tease when I was finished. They said that it would give me a 1-year working visa. And I was like, well, I can't throw that out the window. I have to take this opportunity. So I kind of always wanted to live in New York. I moved to New York and then ended up getting a teaching position, letting go of my position in Fredericton, and just stayed in the city. And I've been here ever since. So
you belong to an artist collective now. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So there are 2 actually. We have an artist-run collective, which is a gallery. It's called Empty Set. There are currently 7 members, and we've been it's been a brainchild for about 2 years. We've been in negotiations and talking with one another, and it was a clear understanding that there was a lack of spaces in the type of galleries that we wanted to run in the Bronx, where I live, where I did a graduate degree. And so we collectively got together and decided that would be an opportunity to open a gallery. And there's another smaller 3 artist membership that's called Infinite Archive, where we investigate things through research. So majority of the work that we produce and the types of artworks that we make usually have some reference to a collection of some kind.
Okay.
So yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Collections are interesting, I've learned.
Collections are super, I have to say that, working with these 2 other people have been really inspiring and creative, but finding archives, and there are billions of them. Every town has an archive. There are usually 3 or 4 to 10 archives in every major city. And, the investigation just takes you in completely different places. So it's good. It's been very good. Yeah.
Right on. Interesting. So where do you get your inspiration from? When I was looking through the more contemporary works that you have done, there seems to be an underpinning of material, like you mentioned earlier, yeah. But the ideas seem to come from a variety of different places. So can you talk a little bit about where your inspiration comes from? How do you approach a problem or a project?
Yeah, I think it usually starts with reading. I'm an avid reader. I really enjoy texts of philosophy and texts that help me address questions I might have. So usually it starts with a question. I go to text, and I have, in the studio, I have books, like tons and tons and tons of books that I record small little tidbits of things I read. And then those tidbits of things I read are usually something at the end of the book. I'll go back and I'll reread my notes on whatever it is I was reading. And the inspiration usually from the works comes from not the book, yes, but the notes, the most important things that I found in that book. And then it starts on a quest of, okay, so if I could conceptualize that, what would that look like, and what material choices would I use? Like, I'm not really, I grew up as I call myself a jeweler loosely. I have been very interested and heavily invested in printmaking as of late. And in between that, I ended up doing a degree in photography. Photography has always kind of been a thread throughout all my work, but I never really understood what it was. And I always thought it was a tool that I would use to document, when in fact it was the document. You know, it was in some of the projects that I invested, it was a way of recording, but it actually embedded itself into becoming the artwork in and of itself. So. Right.
So, for example, the works that we're going to be showing here on Friday from the series Remembering, I guess would fit into that. So that was actually an installation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it was during graduate school in the Maine College of Art, and I went into that program, as I said, to try to keep my hold in Canada. And I didn't really understand the format of the program. The format of the program was based in philosophy, and it was really, let's shed what we know, let's shed the materials we work with, and let's try something new. And they kept pushing me to move away from the materiality of jewelry, but yet conceptualize the idea of what it could exist without a studio, without the foundations of a hammer, you know, the polisher, the materials that I would usually use. And I remember being super frustrated at the very beginning, going, I don't think I can do this. I don't think this is going to work for me. And it took me quite a while. And there were two bodies of work. One, the Lost Ring project, and the second is this Remembering project, both of which I think really started to push me into the conceptualization of, like, what could it be? What is an object? How do we adorn? And what are the antecedents, or what are the connotative values that are involved in jewelry making?
So Patrick, I remember one of the projects that we exhibited was called the Lost Ring Project, and it was fascinating for the idea behind it. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure. So that project was the main focus of my graduate thesis work, and really I made about 3,000 fake gold rings. I stamped them in properly 14 karat gold, and then I went to cities in North America, and I dropped off, based on the population of that city, I dropped off a number of rings. So in New York, I think I dropped off 350 rings in total. I put up posters, and then I would ask that if you found the ring, and the poster was always located very, very close to the drop site. So it was kind of foolproof. You would, I was trying to get as many rings back as I could. And the idea at the beginning of the project was really about this idea of what is a ring, and how we think about a ring, and how much value do we attach to these things. But in the end, the project really became about the conversations about the preciousness of objects, and the lengths people went to get them back, and these weird connections that I would end up having with complete strangers. So that's where that whole project originated from.
And I remember in the exhibition, we actually mounted some of those letters. And I remember some of those letters. Some people were pretty pissed off.
I think as an artist, that was the hardest thing that I had to deal with, was these letters of angst or anger. I never, in my wildest dreams, would think that I would get that kind of a response. And as an artist, where they're damning your work and damning the prospect of it, it can be, it took me a little while to recover from that. But then there were some really beautiful heartfelt letters that were, that brought in a history that I wasn't even asking for, some personal story or some relationship. And I think that, all my work in some way tries to tie in this idea of a narrative. I'm a Nova Scotia, I'm from Nova Scotia. I think we're, storytellers. We're storytellers. So, I am a visual storyteller. That's kind of, and most of my work, I'm realizing more and more that as my practice progresses, that I really am just a storyteller. So, yeah.
Interesting to look back, doing this project and talking to artists 18 years, 20 years later from these projects that we did so long ago. Interesting to see where you guys are now, and interesting to see the kind of trajectory you followed, and the kinds of steps outside of the box that you have all kind of made, and still maintain a connection with your creative selves, and really pushing the medium that you were working with, or sometimes not even in the medium that you were working with. So That's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? Tell us a little bit about.
So well, it kind of ties into this. So I just finished a solo show here in New York, like a week before everything went crazy. And the body of work was called Reliquist. And in Reliquist, I was looking back at artists that have influenced my practice. So, you know, I guess you could say I'm a mid-career artist. I don't know. I still think of myself as like emerging, but sure, I've been doing it for a while.
Yes.
So we'll go with, I guess, the categorization of mid-career. And I was really, you know, I'm interested in, I have been really interested in identifying where my, why I make the things that I make, where those things, where are the antecedents of how I make and why, because I get questioned all the time in my process of like, well, why did you do this? Or how did you come to that? So this whole work is really about, Reliquist is about the investigation of that. Where do these ideas come from, and who in my backpack of artists that I've held so close to me have had significance and importance. And I made a list of about 100 artists.
Yes.
And I've been working through it. So the idea is that I think about that artist, I think about the work that has empowered me, and in some way I recreate that artwork, but I'm trying to embed myself into the artwork. So I redo the artwork, but there is a significant part of me that's now put inside of it. So for example, Onkwara, probably I think in terms of his conceptualization of ideas, I hold very, very tight. And I learned about him at OCAD. And I remember the day, I remember the lecture theater hall, I remember the work. You know, it just has one of those really strong feelings to me. And in this work I wrote, Onkwara did a series called I Woke Up, or I Got Up. And every morning he would, in cities wherever he was traveling, he would find an address in the telephone book, and he would write this person the exact time that he got up, and he would address it and mail it to them. So some random stranger receives this, you know, postcard that says I got up. So I found Onkwara's last address, which is not too far from where I currently live. And I wrote Onkwara, he's since passed, but I wrote Onkwara a postcard and telling him when I was born, what time I was born and where I was born. And then on the outside, he did another series called The Date Paintings, and I put my birth date. So you look through my birth date, and then you see the postcard that I wrote on Onkwara. So, you know, and it looks like an Onkwara work, but there's an embedded part of me inside of it. So each work, you know, and there's several from the Maritimes, you know, call it Wolstenholme, yes. Another important person during my first master's degree, who really, you know, actually during Remembering and the Lost Ring project was really helping me discover myself and giving me the philosophical text that I need. Brigitte Clavette is another artist that has a reliquary that I created for her, and Rick Burns, who yes. I think by far Rick Burns is, we were friends, and we were, you know, it went from a mentor-student relationship to a true friendship, you know? Yeah. So that's where that work is, and that's where I am right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you know, I find as I get older that, you know, and this has kind of been digging up a lot of stuff for me too, is, you know, you forget the places you were.
You do, yeah. And I think you forget the value of the interactions that you've had. They become part of you, you move forward, but you know, if you slow things down and you really look at things, and that's what I am trying to do with this work. This work is ongoing. It's not, I did have the exhibition, but I'm reworking it now, and there's so many artists that I can choose from that
yes.
inform my practice. But it really is slowing it down and saying, wow, you know, some people are really still close to my heart. I talk to every day. Other artists I have never met. I have no physical connection to them at all, but we have this, you know, this beautiful conceptual connection that I admire and I love. So
yeah, and you honor.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. Wow. Yeah. And so how have you fared during COVID-19? You're a teacher. How has that affected your work? Yeah,
it's been amazing and difficult at the same time. You know, I've had a lot more studio time. I have set my parameters of my day to finish work with students between like 9 and 12. And then, you know, I can either grade or do other things. I think the connection, I really pride myself in the connection I have with students. I think any student that has ever had me, that's super important. in my practice as a teacher. So that has been difficult, having these weird disconnects and not really feeling like I can help. And also, you know, I teach darkroom photography and jewelry design.
Yeah, pretty hands-on.
Very difficult thing to do without a studio. Super difficult. And, you know, the kids don't have materials. So, you know, you're trying to keep that passion. You're trying to keep them involved, understanding that they have access to nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been beautiful at the same time. You know, I look at my art practice and a trajectory, and I can also look at my teaching practice and a trajectory, and there's been some really powerful things that have come out of this in terms of how I look at curriculum and how I look at teaching, and how I can get my point of arrival and departure are completely, you know, my point of arrival at the end is the same, but my point of departure is completely different.
Yes.
And it's very, very cool. It's super cool.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for everybody, that's for sure. And great when you're a creative person, you can actually, this becomes fuel for a much larger evaluation and understanding of what has been going on here. So Patrick, can you tell us a little bit about the project Re-Remembering? That's the work that we're featuring in this upcoming Friday's release.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of near and dear to my heart still. The project originated, my mother, when she was 18, was in a serious car accident, and she was projected from a car and had severe damage to the right side of her face. And it was through reconstructive surgery, and she still sees the scars. I don't see the scars. She's my mother. I have never, you know, but I think that the antecedent for that project really came from a consistent conversation about how she felt internally and externally. And then, you know, while I was studying at the Maine College of Art, we were asked to try to find new ways of making. I considered myself a jeweler, so they wanted to keep in that vein, but they didn't want me to use the studio. And I think that the project really, I ended up gold leafing scars, and I found individuals. You know, it started with my mother, although my mother wasn't a participant in the project, but she's always been, I think, a participant in that project. And you know, it was about this idea of beautifying a mark that was hurtful or painful, and having or what would be considered ugly. And then, you know, it ended up as a documentation. So there are two parts. There are these large prints, which now I kind of laugh because now technology has changed so much. A big print's a big print. But then at the time, it was like, there was you know, they were big prints, and I was super excited and to make them. But the other part was really, as I was doing we'll call it a procedure, but as I was gold leafing the scar, I would have a voice recorder, and I was having conversations with the participant, and I was asking them how the scar came into being, and talked a little bit about the scar. So the result in the gallery space is, you know, you're looking at these almost like golden landscapes, and then you're ambiently in the gallery space, you're listening to these stories, these retellings. So there's this juxtaposition, or this weird altercation of like something damaging and something terrible that happened amongst these, you know, these lovely images of golden landscapes.
Yes, so, yes. I think that's what struck me, especially looking at them now from a distance. How beautifully landscapey they are, and how gorgeous the seam of gold. And it's like finding that seam of gold within terrain, you know?
Yeah. No,
I would like to thank you very much for being with us here today. It's been an honor and a pleasure to speak with you, and wonderful to see you.
Likewise, I know, it's been a while.
That's one thing that's fabulous about, you know, things like Zoom is you can be in New York City, I can be in Fredericton, and we're still very much in the same room. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.